Warren, first of all, thank you for sitting down and talking with us today. I appreciate it.
It's always good to sit down.
Yes, I find the same thing. The last time we sat down and spoke with you, or I guess it was 2 times ago in March when we sat down with you to talk about what you were doing with your charitable giving, you said that you were going to be watching and waiting, that you were kind of waiting to see what came out about Bill Gates and the Epstein files and what had happened. You said you hadn't determined what you were going to do. Today, you put out a release saying that you will be increasing the amount of money that you give to the Susan Thomas Buffett Foundation, your 3 children's foundations, but there will be nothing given right now to the Gates Foundation. Is that your decision?
That's correct. But in interpreting that, I would point out that I read a great deal since January 1st in terms of what happened with Bill and Epstein. And I read his remarks to Congress given under oath, and I read cross-examination. And while it's distasteful, and while he made mistakes, I made mistakes in hiring all kinds of people or choosing friends, and then finding out later that one way or another they weren't what I thought they were. And so I found nothing in there that was beyond what I could see. I could picture myself doing. And you know, he ended it, and I've had situations where I made mistakes about people, or people felt they made mistakes about me, but they, you know, life goes on, and no one bats 1,000 in the business of choosing people.
You're talking about hiring decisions, maybe who you're associating yourself with, and there were certainly some questionable decisions on that came up in the release of these files, but there was also other, you know, personal information.
Yeah, no, which he admitted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and there again, I would say that, you know, I've known some pretty wonderful people, and I still know some wonderful people. I don't think they've made every decision correctly.
So why, if that's your opinion on it, why are you no longer giving money to the Gates Foundation?
I reevaluated my whole situation. It's just like I've been doing since I was in my 20s, and we'd gotten married, Susie and I, and we didn't really have any money, but we did know that we intended to live fine, and we intended to have a family, and but we did not have aspirations of, you know, having 6 houses or a 500-foot yacht or anything of the sort. So even then, we talked about what we would do philanthropically. Mm-hmm. But my idea and conviction was that I would compound money at a better rate than society generally, and that Susie would give it away better than 99.9% of the people that were giving it away, and she would get involved personally with the gifts, whereas I like to do things wholesale, and she liked to do things retail. So we had a plan, but we didn't have any money. And over time, the money started to pile up, and she would say, "Are we rich yet?" And I would say, "No, but we're getting closer." But I was not in a hurry to do anything. We did some small things as we went along. I did it I felt the most important threat to mankind was the nuclear bomb, and so I had sort of grandiose plans in my mind about how I could change the probabilities of that happening. And I finally came to the conclusion after decades that I could not have a 100th or 1,000th of 1% chance of succeeding in that. And you know, it's nice to bet on long shots, but betting on things that are.
So you've changed your plans.
So I changed plans.
Why did you change your plans?
Well, we changed plans because of what I've said out here. The money began to pile up.
No, but you changed your plan now. In 2024, you said it was a lifetime pledge to the Gates Foundation. Now in 2026, you were saying that's not the case. What happened?
Yeah. Well, what happened was that gave the Gates Foundation a great deal of money.
Maybe $47 billion
Yeah,
in total.
and I had no, and I thought that was a good decision. I think it was a decent decision, but I did not think my kids were in any way ready to give away vast sums of money. We'd started, Susie and I started with them. I think we may have given them $100,000 each.
This goes back 30 years at this point, or longer?
That's about right, yeah. But they were growing children. I mean, they had children of their own by that time. But still, I don't think they were ready for it, and I certainly wanted to treat them all equally. Mm-hmm. So that's always a problem, is if they have unequal talents at something. Now, I can't turn them all into musicians, and I can't turn them all into baseball players or anything, but I really hoped in the charitable field that they would have common goals and be able to work out among themselves a way where, with vast amounts of money, that everybody felt there was plenty to do what they wanted to do.
And you think that's the case today?
Pardon me?
You think that's the case today?
I feel the probabilities of that are extraordinarily high. And now, could something happen to this plan? Of course. I mean, I've got 3 children that are 72 and 71, and look at my age. I mean, things can happen in this world that cause you to change. But I have no expectation of changing. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we've reached the ideal point. We kicked. Well, Susie died in 2004, so it's been more me kicking up the amount they received annually, and clearly they feel happy with the job too. I mean, there's no sense sticking people in a job that they aren't fit for, or they differ totally from you and your views. I mean, I had different views in life than my dad, who I admired more than anybody in the world. But it still didn't mean that I joined his church or did anything identically. And he encouraged that view. He would quote to me Emerson, where Emerson said something to the effect that the force in you is new in nature. Saying you're one of a kind. Find out what that one is. And I think I found it very young, by luck. Circumstance and pretty purposeful pursuit myself. My kids did not. They behaved like most kids. They flirted with a lot of different ideas, and but I feel 100% now about what I have seen them do. My son Howard just published a 100-page or so report and explaining what he's doing, why he's doing, what it's costing. An annual
report for the Howard Buffett Foundation.
Yeah, and it's better than I could write. He has a sense of stewardship, and he also has enormous empathy for people he sees that don't have it as lucky as he is.
So then is it fair to say 20 years ago in 2006, when you made this decision, you trusted the Gates Foundation more than your children, and now you trust your children more than the Gates Foundation?
No, because the amounts were different. It isn't to say that I trusted them differently, but I felt they were capable of handling it. I was certainly not going to turn something over to my kids and then pull it back from them. I mean, and the Gates Foundation has turned out to earn far more money than they expected to do. They spend more money than anybody in the world that I can think of.
Yeah, they have an endowment of north of $90 billion, I think, at this point.
It's around that figure, and Bill has very substantial resources outside, which he intends to give, and I believe 100%. I believe that they will go there, and I've really done the same thing as Bill in a certain sense. Except when I put it in, I tell the 3 children that it is theirs and it's their responsibility to get it done well, and you may find this hard to believe, but it's true. I've never looked at their Form 990s, which they file. I'm not judging each action as it takes place, because you take actions where you think there's only a 10% or 20% probability of success. It's not like investments.
But what are your goals for the money? And you kind of intimated that the kids have similar goals as to what you have.
There are all kinds of ways in which the world is as unequal as you can possibly imagine. I mean, just imagine in health or the luck of birth or all of those sort of things. And the ultimate goal is to make life better for the people who get short straws. And there's a lot more people who get short straws than we'll ever be able to take care of. And my kids will have more insight into certain areas than I would. And I have more insight than they do, just because of different interests and exposure. But the one thing I'm convinced of is that they will be attempting to do something, and they'll be better at it. And the probability is that they've got more years to live than I do. So, I mean, it really sneaks up on you when you get to be in the 70s or something like that. But I can't think of a person in the world that 30 or under, for example, I would trust to do it. I think there's all kinds of brilliant people that are 30 or under, and they may turn out to be leaders of society and terribly important writers or whatever it may be. But I do think there's something to seeing how people behave under different circumstances.
The kids are going to come under pressure, and probably already have, from a long list of people who think that they should fund their ideas. I saw something today on X that Brad Gerstner put out suggesting that you give the money to Trump accounts, that
Sure.
there are other great things to do. What do you say to the lots and lots of people who will say this is where you should put that money? Or what do you think they should say?
If you take 8 billion people in the world and feel that everybody should have an equal chance, I mean, you could spend $1,000 or $10,000 and to solve everybody's problems. You're never going to solve everybody's problems. The idea of solving a societal problem, which is what I started out as, with the nuclear weapon. I mean, everybody who worked on the nuclear weapon regretted the fact that they had to put together something like that, the most brilliant people in the world, but they never figured out how to put the olive back in the bottle. And that is not something that society in the first couple 100 million years of existence, or a couple million.
Do any of those plans, though, like the Trump accounts, appeal to you? Do you think they appeal to the kids? Or do you just leave it to the kids and say you figure it out?
I leave it to the kids, but I do have this provision in my will, not in these gifts that I'm giving now, but in the bulk of my fortune is likely to be left upon my death, even though I'm stepping up the...
Yeah, I will say right now it's $140 billion that you have left based on yesterday's closing stock price in terms of the Class A shares you have left. If the money you gave out this year is $6 billion.
Yeah, it'll have to go up.
Right, it's $17.5 billion at least annually, and that's assuming that Berkshire doesn't go up from here.
Yeah,
if you want this to be given out in 8 years,
which is a terrible
as
assumption,
you've said.
incidentally. Yeah. I mean, that is not a realistic assumption.
To give $17.5 billion away annually?
Well, no, that an investment produces nothing. I mean,
correct.
Yeah,
So
I get my 5% Treasury bills.
right. How much did you have when you started making these donations in 2006? We were talking about less than $100 billion at that point, right?
Yeah.
So you've given away $67 billion, and now you have $140 billion left to give as of today.
Interest.
Right.
That's one thing I understand. I may not understand all these other things, but
$17.5 billion, even if it weren't to go up, is more money than anybody is giving away right now. The Gates Foundation gave away what, $8 billion last year?
Yeah, that's about right. And
that's
and
a lot.
They did it employing a few thousand people, which almost any foundation would that had that kind of money. And I'm impressed by the fact that my kids really want to give the money away rather than do other things with it as they go along. So they...
You mean rather than spend it on themselves?
Yeah, or
give
buildings or anything of the sort.
Right.
Now, when they're they'll need more help as they go along. But I think the foundations employ something between. There's 3 of them now.
4 of them, with the STB Foundation.
Well, with STB. Well, let's take the kids first, though, because they make the total decision as to what they're doing, and they have between 11 and 25 employees, and
Total between the 3 foundations?
No, each.
Okay.
Yeah, and they have expense ratios far below that of institutions that are much better known, and
expense
so
ratio is closer to 1% or less.
They've shown that they're not regarding it as play money.
Right. Right, meaning that the bulk, almost everything they get goes back out the door.
Well, it really all goes out the door eventually, but they're not going to build, huge home office buildings or hold conferences at esoteric places and all kinds of things. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, but the important thing is whether people that have 100 times what they need don't pass it along to somebody else for the next generation. And in many parts of the world, they've been doing that for thousands of years.
Yeah, you're not a big fan of bureaucracy. Berkshire Hathaway was run here in this office with 25 people or something in the home office.
And we probably went up. We probably grew in size 10 for 1 before we added the last 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm. Before we move on, does Bill Gates know about this? When we spoke with you in March, you said you had not spoken with him since any of these allegations started coming out. He said the same thing last month in June when he sat down with this congressional testimony, that he had not spoken with you since January. Have you spoken with him since, and does this come as a surprise to him?
No, no, it does not come as a surprise. And B, he came by Omaha, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, or I kind of lose track on time, but certainly not 3 months, but since we talked. And we spent 3 hours talking together, and he intends to call me. He's the one that initiates calls just generally, and as you can see, I'm available anytime. but he's much more organized than I am, and but he's already proposed another one, and
another meeting.
Yeah, and he is. We have had an enormous number of good times together since we met. Whatever it was, 1991. Mm-hmm. And he's always done more than a share, always more than a share. You don't see me doing the planning or the...
In the friendship, you mean?
Yeah, it's been a wonderful friendship. And Bill and I are interested in enough things that overlap that we find plenty to talk about, and then each of us has got his own specialty to some extent.
But you told him three weeks ago or so when you met him that you would not be making any more donations to the Gates Foundation?
Yeah, I may have even, I can't tell you exactly what I told him, but at some point I had read what Congress came up with. I'd read everything, and all I can say is, I don't know whether I've done dumber things, but I've done things. I've just done many dumb things in life. I mean, that is, all I have to do is look at our portfolio. I mean, 4 out of 5 of our, at least 4 out of 5 of the decisions I've made have not been anything out of the ordinary.
But he was okay when you told him that this was okay.
Yeah.
So he's on board. None of this is news to him.
Bill, unlike me, more or less, I think, wants it to end when he dies. Then, of course, he doesn't know
His
when.
foundation.
The Gates Foundation. Yeah. Whereas, I hope that my kids live a lot longer than I do, and I hope all 3 participate. And I think all 3 will be better off for doing it. But that's not a decision that was made. Well, when Susie and I started giving them, I think we moved it up to maybe $30 million a year.
To the kids' foundations?
No, actually to their foundations. I don't remember the exact figures at all. But we gave it to them when we were 99% sure that they were willing and in some cases, in a certain way, eager to do things for other people. They've had a good life. Yeah. They haven't. Well, they've followed that rule that somebody told me a long time ago, but which I get credit for, but I think about myself, which is that if you're the child of some very rich family, that you should have enough. You should be given enough to do something, but not enough to do nothing.
Right.
And that's exactly what's been going on at an increased scale. But I have to step it up now because at my age, the probabilities really get against me. So that the last will I wrote is very likely to be my final will, whereas the wills I was writing when I was 30 or 40 or 50, I knew they would change.
Right. Let's talk about that. The other thing that you're announcing in this is that you would like to see the money go out at an expedited, and the shares go out at an expedited rate. To this point, it had kind of been 10 years after your death. You thought the shares would all be dispersed to charity. Now you're saying that you would like all of those shares to be dispersed 8 years from now, by the end of 2034.
Yeah.
What changed your mind on that, and what does that mean?
Well, it certainly means that I had two purposes in all the philanthropy, and particularly with essentially 100% of my money in Berkshire. That's my painting, and I like the painting. I like the people associated with it, and it's been refined over time. I've added an apple over here or something, and I don't know of 10 people in the United States that I would trust to hand it over to.
Your company. You're talking your company.
The company.
Right.
I don't know of 5 people, and I know a lot of people. and now I have a very high standard in terms of what I'm looking for in that person, and clearly we've found him with Greg Abel. So, and that becomes more evident by the day. Even this year, there's been added things that. So
you don't think you need to hold on to the shares or have your family have voting power over those shares for as long because you think Greg Abel is...
He is the choice. The only question is he's not immortal either. Right. You always have this mortality question, and nobody gets away from it. People can be in marvelous health or seem like it, and who died the other day? Lindsey Graham, 71 or something. So there's an enormous variety and variation from being lucky to not being lucky, and that's the bet I make with Greg. I do not have a list of 10. I don't have 10 kids either, but even I don't have a list of 3.
In terms of who you would trust the company to at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
Now I've got directors that I trust to be imbued with they like the concept of Berkshire Hathaway, and they would like to keep it going. So I've got the right group that's the intermediary in making that choice. But things don't always work out perfectly as the world.
So your hope is that the shares will be dispersed by the end of 2034, just over 8 years from now, 8.5 years from now. But I take it if you're not here and the kids are the one making the choices, you would leave it to their decision making at that point?
Yeah, and 8 years from now, my daughter will be 80, very close to 81. And another one will be 70. And it's not just a question of mortality; it's a question of keeping our marbles too.
Have they heard you say it like this?
Well, I'm losing marbles at this point. I accumulated marbles for a longer time than I deserved, and that's just a matter of luck. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen so many managers of our companies that, well, I think I've mentioned it in a few annual reports, annual meetings. I mean, we had guys cutting out paper dolls, and there's, and their assistants covering for them.
Okay, just to clarify at this point, you are saying this of your right mind while you're making these decisions, correct?
I hope
so. Maybe you should
But actually, I
clarify
wrote the will a couple of years ago. So
Yeah.
and I will not knowingly, I will not change that will, except for extremely important decisions, because there's no question that I had my marbles when I wrote it.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what happens now, because you've talked about how this is really your children making the decisions, but in the announcement that you're putting out now, you increased each of your children's foundations, the amount you're giving them, by about 50%.
But
over what you gave them last year.
Thompson Foundation.
But it's the Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation that really is seeing the outsized gains in what they're going to be giving away. The amount of shares they received this year is tenfold what it was last year.
Yeah.
Basically, they're getting all the money that would have gone to the Gates Foundation.
Well,
Why?
they're getting all the money that would have gone to the Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation.
And-
if my
and-
first
and
wife
then some.
would have survived.
Right, and then some. But
Yeah.
basically, the payout they're going to be getting this year in terms of what they can disperse is $4.5 billion. That's how much the Gates Foundation got last year. Why so much more to the STB Foundation than the other three foundations, relatively speaking? Everybody gets more, but why that outsized
Well, the
amount?
STB Foundation is what, and I would say, totally, my first wife would have created, and I would have approved it. I mean, we were on the same page in all kinds of questions that aren't even questions anymore in terms of women's rights, civil rights. We were in sync. Now she took an interest in listening to everybody's story. That would be the last thing in the world I would want to do. She saw every individual as an individual, but she also saw them as a group. I saw them as a group, and I had other things that fascinated me more.
This money that goes through, is this what you will anticipate seeing from this point on? In years past at Thanksgiving, you've given additional disbursements to the Three Kids Foundations. Do you plan to do that again this year?
Yeah, I'm almost sure I will, but regardless, the other goes on. If I'm more probable to die before Thanksgiving than any of my three children, and probably the probability of all three combined. But I also enjoy explaining why I take actions, just like I do in the annual report on Berkshire. I've got a didactic streak, which my partner Charlie Munger had, and to us, the money wasn't. Well, the money was important in terms of what it could actually do for other people. It wasn't important for what it could do for me. I have not denied myself anything in life.
If something happens that you're not here to make these decisions, does it revert to what you talked about last year in your will, where there is a new foundation that is created?
Yeah, there's a new foundation.
And the three kids are in charge?
It has to be because it does have slight variations, one being unanimous consent among the three for anything they do.
Does the STB Foundation or the Kids Foundations, do they have to spend the money in this fiscal year as was required of the Gates Foundation, or is this something where they can take their time and make their plans?
They know my views on it, but they can do what they want. But if their wants get away from the basic principles far enough, you look at it again. But that isn't going to happen.
Warren, you've spent most of your adult life thinking about philanthropy. How have your views changed over time? What would you like to see happen with this? I think about the Giving Pledge and what you all did. What's your perspective at this point?
Well, the perspective I have is that out of 8 billion people, I may be one of the 10 luckiest in the world. So I've been lucky and healthy to get to 95. I've been lucky in that the field that intrigued me and where I had some natural ability happened to be one that paid off in a way that would nothing paid off like it. I've been a great violin player, you know, anything else. It requires more talent than I have, but a different form of talent. And fortunately, I got exposed, partly accidentally, to what I liked to do very early on, and that was just an accident. If my father had been a plumber, I would not have had the same advantage I had. So I was incredibly lucky, and then as life has gone along, I have seen how unbelievably unlucky some people have been, and it is luck. I mean, you know, we had accidents with the kids when they were young, and all kinds of things can happen. And they just didn't happen to us.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about a few other things while we have you here. Is there more you wanted to say?
Let me add one more thing on that, though. I mean, the whole idea of kings and queens and everything, where you pass along for thousands of years the ability to live in any manner you wish, you know, while you say let them eat cake to the rest, that is not the way the system would be if I had my way of designing a world. And I can't change the design of the world, but I can nibble at the edges.
And those are the same values that your wife Astrid and your kids all have too?
100%, and I'm glad you mentioned Astrid, because she's as extreme in this view as you can imagine, and she's actually experienced more hardship in life than either Susie or I did, because she's Latvian, and you know, and came over in a boat in Ellis Island, and didn't know who she was being assigned to, lived in foster homes, all kinds of things. So the accidents of birth are just so extreme, and I've seen people that use those accidents to justify positions that are just ridiculous, in my view, and that's the reason for encouraging philanthropy. You can't mandate it. It isn't philanthropy if you mandate it, but most people are a combination, you know, of lots of good instincts and lots of not so good instincts, and including me. And if you do things that appeal to their better instincts, they respond sometimes.
And by the way, your point with the Giving Pledge, when you founded that with Bill and Melinda Gates, was to encourage people to give to anything, but not to try and tell them what to do with their money.
Exactly, and also decide when they would do it. I mean, a family that's got a family farm they've had for 100 years, and they're, you know, within the family, they've all worked at it and everything, they're going to have a different view toward capital. They're always going to work hard, but they're going to have a whole different view than some guy that is writing options on Wall Street.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about a few other things that have happened maybe since we got the chance to sit down last in May. The first that I can think of is the massive position that Berkshire has developed and grown in Alphabet, in Google shares. That's something that a lot of people have looked at and said, okay, this is Greg's mark on how he's going to be changing the portfolio. How did the Alphabet position come along?
I initiated it. I mean, I normally wouldn't give you an answer on something like that, but I will, because I am not doing anything that he doesn't approve of. He's not doing anything I don't approve of. We talk all the time. He's well, every day. I mean, but he is the decider. And getting back to Alphabet or Google, it's probably number 5 or 6.
Well, I thought it was number 3 if you consider the $10 billion private placement that would go along with that, because that would put it north of $31 billion.
Yeah, but we've got the Burlington Northern Railroad, which is certainly worth far more money than that.
So you're counting fully
Absolutely.
owned companies as well.
You know, I mean, we are always making the choice between whether we'll buy marketable securities or the company. We look at them the same way. There are some minor exceptions to that. We can't set dividend policy, for example, if we don't own it. But the chances of those being material, the important thing is to buy a good business and to buy it on the right terms and to get a right person to run it.
Okay, but you've quickly grown a north of $30 billion investment in Alphabet. That puts it, in terms of those companies that you own pieces of, behind only Apple and American Express. So Coca-Cola would be smaller, Bank of America would be smaller?
It's kind of close. But if you take Coca-Cola, which we've owned, 45 years, whatever it may be, we don't have a thing to do with running that business, but it's a very good business. And when I say a very good business, I mean something that you can expect to earn high returns on capital over a long period of time. Now the question is, when you get into Google, or any of the AI companies, you're putting out huge amounts of money, and I can put huge amounts of money into government bonds and get, 20 or 30 or 40 billion dollars a year in terms of payments from them. So a good business is one that earns a lot more than and has prospects of continuing to earn a lot more than the returns on essentially riskless investments, which you could define as treasuries. But if you take something like American Express, most of the banks earn 13, 14% on capital. If I asked everybody to guess what American Express would, they would come up with some figure similar, but it's so different that it earns 30% plus on capital and does not incur more risk in doing so than the banks that earn 13 or 14%. And the trick in life is to find, in investing, is to find businesses that are going to earn high returns on capital for an extended period of time. And that's what happened with Berkshire for a long period of time. A long period of time gets to be very important because those doubles later on are very big numbers. But Charlie Munger, my partner for decades, he just pounded the idea that it wasn't a good business just because it was doing sexy things or whatever it might be, but if it wasn't earning real cash, that it would or be expected to do it in a very short period of time, and just be able to distribute it if it wanted to. Better yet, if it could reemploy it as a business, it was even better than one that had the ability to earn high returns, but you couldn't deploy the excess capital of those returns.
Okay, let me ask you though. Forever, people have thought of you as somebody who doesn't invest in technology. And by the way, you've described yourself as somebody who doesn't invest in technology. Obviously, the biggest position in the Berkshire portfolio is Apple, a position that you put on, but at the time you called that a consumer company. Google, you just called an AI company. So what happened?
Google, the real question with Google and all of its competitors now, because they're all laying out hundreds of billions.
They're big capex spenders.
So
the biggest.
Yeah, and that's real money. If our railroad were to lay out 300 million or billion or 200 billion, that kind of money wasn't even put in the railroad business, in terms of developing it. So, and that's the game they're playing now. They weren't playing that game with computer software.
No, so when they were asset light, you didn't like them, and the markets loved them. Now that they are
I made a mistake.
Spending heavily on CapEx, a lot of shareholders don't like them as much because
I
they don't.
think they're more likely to be a winner based on the record than probably 90% or 95% of what gets merchandised through Wall Street, because Wall Street is interested in whether they can sell something. And I can't recall a report on Wall Street that really gets into the internal rates of return that a business is actually earning. Now, what's more important than what a business is earning? But they ask all these questions about what will happen next quarter, or it's just, it's ridiculous. But investing is coming up with, well, probably as close to the most successful long-term investor was Rockefeller, but look at what oil and gas has done over 150 or a couple of hundred years. So he kept compounding at a very good rate, not as good a rate as Geico would have achieved in his early years, because it's easier to do when you're small. Getting to do it when you're large is, you got the whole world looking at you, trying to figure out, how come those guys are doing it, we're not doing it.
Why do you like Alphabet above all others, and what made you initiate this position? What was the eureka moment?
I would say that I don't like it as well as at least 4 or 5 other businesses that we own.
Other than Apple, the railroad,
well,
American Express?
You're not going to get the whole portfolio out of me, but and of course,
but you like it enough to make it a huge position.
I like Berkshire that way.
Yeah.
I mean, Berkshire earned high returns on capital without. I'm not talking about using the tricks of leverage or that sort of thing. I'm talking about.
But I'm talking about why Alphabet versus the other Magnificent Seven or the other hyperscalers who are doing the same thing, spending a lot of money, Amazon, Microsoft, whoever it may be, to try and win in this position of AI.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to sit around knocking the others. They don't have any choice.
Yeah. To spend like this, you mean?
They're now playing a game in many cases or some cases, where they're playing a game they don't want to play. IBM would have loved it if they just kept playing the game that IBM was playing in the 30s or the 40s or the 50s or the 60s, and then somebody came along and said, we'll get a better result for you, achieving the objective of all the customers you have, because that's all you're going to have is you either have happy customers, you don't have customers over time. And the customer's not dumb. Wall Street can be very dumb, and in terms of they can dream, but a guy with a grocery store can't dream. I mean, I worked at my grandfather's grocery store, and we saw, well, we had one store in 1869, and we had one store in 1969, and other people were earning high returns on capital, some on a national scale. A&P, which people don't associate with anymore. In the 1930s, I mean, they were number one, enemy number one of trustbusters in Washington, and they had a very, very, very good hand, and that hand disappeared.
So it's a different game, and you like this game, you understand this game more than you understood the game they were playing before. Is that fair to say?
There's all kinds of games I don't understand. Sure.
Yeah. But this game.
Why should I expect to make money in all kinds of things I don't understand? Mm-hmm.
But that's what I'm getting at. What do you understand about this game at this point? Because most people would say he's never going to buy any technology stocks, and I think you've said the same thing yourself in the past.
Yeah, but I've done it. And actually, one of the most successful companies I was associated with, going back to 1958, we started a company called Data Documents.
Right.
We started Data Documents because a couple of pals of mine read in the paper that IBM had settled an antitrust suit by divesting. They had to divest 50% of the capacity of what was their best business. And everybody knew it was their best business. Now, it so happens it ran out after 10 or 15 years, and I knew some of the people that caused it to run out. But if you have a wonderful business, you are going to be subject to attack. So it's not a question of whether it was wonderful yesterday. It's the question is how long is it going to be wonderful?
But that's what I think I love. People can try and pigeonhole you and say they know who you are and what you do. To me, it looks like you're 95, turning 96 next month, and you are still changing and following the game.
Yeah, but it's easier for me. If somebody came along, well, I'm just trying to think of what it might be, better candy. That would have more predictive value to me than if they came along and had a better way of doing something that 100 of their competitors would sneak in the plant at night to see exactly how they got it all done.
Let's talk about your largest position, Apple. You told us that you were thrilled with everything that Tim Cook had done. I don't know how well you know John Ternus at this point or what you think of the company's doing. You still have a lot of faith in Apple?
Well, there was no move they could make that would replace Tim that I would have liked. Net. I mean, if you got somebody, Stradivarius playing the violin for you, yeah. I mean, don't spend the next 300 years looking for another one. I mean, you've got one already, and of course, Wall Street thrives on the idea that convincing you that if you just listen to them, they've got something that nobody else has. Well, which can't be true. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it works because, well, in general, it works because America has been a wonderful place to invest money. Mm-hmm. And the Dow Industrials, when I bought my first stock, had just crossed 100, and now it's 52,000 or something, and you've got dividends in between and all kinds. Well, I mean, the village idiot could have made it from that point forward. Yeah. And so I've been in the right game. If I'd been in wheat speculation, I mean, wheat's gone from, I don't know whether it's gone from $3 to $5 or something over 200 years. And it's a very simple business, as long as you keep remembering that it's simple and that making it complicated it's just crazy. At that point, you're gambling.
But do you still like Apple?
People's enthusiasm for gambling is enormous.
You've talked about that over the last many years, probably since COVID. But you still like Apple. Back to the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know more about Apple than I knew many years ago. But on the other hand, if you're Apple, you've got very, very smart people all over the world shooting and trying to figure out how to make sure that Apple's future, the future, is as bright as it is in the past. And look at the car companies. I mean, Henry Ford owned the car business for 20 or 25 years, and he brutally integrated like you cannot believe. He drove costs down. He got the cost of Model T down, I think, to $285, and he always was decreasing prices while increasing wages. Right. So but he also was a little nuts in some ways, and that did him in. Finally, when he converted over to the Model A, and General Motors just came racing by, and my friend Charlie Munger thought that General Motors was going to be the dominant company. Who could imagine attacking their dealer fleet and everything they had going for them? You've always got somebody shooting at you.
To that point, Apple brought a lawsuit against OpenAI just last week, and basically accused OpenAI of trying to steal trade secrets.
I would say most companies would love to try to steal trade secrets. They wouldn't love getting caught. But if you really could dig deep into the hearts of managers, they'd like to steal secrets. Wouldn't you? I mean, if you had a business and you were struggling along, and the guy next door was making money, I had a half interest in a Sinclair filling station at 30th and Reddick in Omaha when I was in my early 20s, and I'd been to business school and knew all these things. And the guy next door had the Phillips station, and he was pumping 30,000 barrels, 30,000 gallons a month, and we were pumping 15,000 gallons a month. So I said, we're going to wipe this guy off the face of the earth. And you know, a couple of years later, we were selling 15,000, and he was selling 30,000, and we gave up, and we closed up, and I think he's still operating. It's people are playing for keeps in business.
Yeah. We talked about Coca-Cola briefly, the longtime position you've held for more than 45 years. There is a major lawsuit with the government that could look at action, I believe, going all the way back to 1996 with Coca-Cola. The government, the IRS, has said that they owe them
$20
billion, roughly.
Billion, of which they paid.
I think they put $10 billion or so, something.
Close to $10 billion.
Right. But we're going to hear about whether the activities, and this has to do with overseas, their overseas business, just some of the accounting that goes back and forth. Coca-Cola says that they thought they had an agreement in 1996 that stood with how they should behave. The government's now looking for more money and saying that's not the case. It's not just Coca-Cola that's riding on this. So there's a lot of other American businesses who are doing the same thing.
Oh, well, a huge number, which is why the derivative effects of the suit could be the biggest in American history.
What do you think of this? And with the understanding that you are a Coca-Cola shareholder, a large Coca-Cola shareholder, was this an overzealous government looking for ways to raise more money? Was this a company that performed badly or that behaved badly?
I've got a dog in that fight. So,
yeah, so you don't want
to. No, that's why we have courts.
Yeah, so you'll wait and see what happens with it.
No,
but I take it you're watching this closely.
Yeah. Paying the extra money won't break Coca-Cola any more than anything I can think of would break Berkshire. I mean, I look at, all I do is think about the downside. The upside will take care of itself.
Right. We also have a new FOMC chairman, Kevin Warsh, who is taking a look at the economy. This week he's going to be, or he is speaking in front of Congress. A lot of questions about what he'll do with the markets, what he'll do with interest rates, and what that in turn means for the markets. You in the past have spoken about how interest rates are gravity, and it determines where stock market prices are headed. Right. So what do you think happens? What are you betting?
I don't know what he'll do, but I would say that that job is so complicated. I think the other day he was quoted as saying, you know, that they have 950 economists when they could use about 10. You know, I admire him for taking on the job. I think he will do the best he can at achieving the job he was assigned to do, which is, you know, 2% inflation and while maintaining maximum employment. And my guess is that just like some of the others that have preceded him, not all of them, but he would read that every morning. You know, I mean,
the dual mandate of the Fed.
The dual mandate, and he doesn't. He knows he can't be perfect at it, and just like I know I couldn't be perfect at taking people's money and earning super returns on it. But my guess is that people were right in realizing that I cared about what happened to their money, and I would say that Warsh he cares about the country, and I think that's been true of a good many. It doesn't mean their decisions are always great, but because sometimes the decisions are so tough. I mean, imagine Paul Volcker getting, you know, death threats all the time, and others just think they know more than they do.
But you think Kevin knows a lot and is a...
I think he's a very, I think he was a good choice.
Okay.
Which probably means that the president will be mad. Future presidents will be mad at him because future presidents are looking at the next election, and he's not supposed to be looking at the next election.
Right. obviously don't come out and make calls on where the market's headed at any point in time, but you
Nope.
do make calls on market behavior and what makes sense to you and what doesn't. Do you think the markets make sense to you when there's so much riding on AI? Earnings have been very strong. The consumer looks like it's held into this point, but how do you view it?
Well, I think there are times when opportunities are just thrown at you so fast you can't, it's unbelievable. And then there's other times when you're very, very lucky if you find one thing in a couple of years. And it should always be that the latter is what prevails. But since humans love to gamble so much, there's more money in actually cultivating gamblers than there are cultivating investors. If somebody bought Berkshire 40 years, 50 years ago, a guy would have made one commission. and he should spend the rest of his time telling the client, don't do anything with it. And that's just not the way. We can't expect that of humans. But every now and then you do find people you find people who behave far better than other people.
Fair to say, though, it's tougher to find values or find
It's
cheap
tough to find
opportunities?
values when everybody is preferring gambling.
Yeah.
And from the standpoint of the state, we may have discussed this, but from the standpoint of the state, it's sort of disgusting because the state needs money for all kinds of things, roads, schools, you name it. And they have found that they can clip people who are buying nothing but hope, selling them something with a payout ratio of 60% or something like that. And if they weren't doing that, they'd have to have the income tax higher.
Right.
It's a cynical sort of activity, and I think the less you get cynicism between the governing body and the people of government, you don't want people to be cynical about their system. But there's times when the system says, just be as cynical as you want because this is what I'm going to do, baby.
Let's go back very quickly. You touched on this. Part of the reason that you want the shares given out over the next 8 years is because you want your kids making these decisions. But the other part is that you don't feel like you necessarily have to hold on to these voting shares of Berkshire for as long because you have faith in Greg.
Yeah, exactly. And if we didn't have faith, well, part of the reason I'm around is because we didn't have sufficient faith in anybody. And we know all kinds of people, but I mean, if you were talking about Tom Murphy, I mean, if I could have hired Tom Murphy, but the trouble was they were all older, and all my friends were pretty much older, so I didn't, it wasn't like I was in college and I could see who really had it and, who was writing crib sheets on their answers on their shoulder, on their shirt cuffs.
But you feel that way with Greg.
I feel 100% that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen him in a lot of situations. A lot of situations. I felt that way with Charlie. I felt that way with Tom Murphy. And but nobody expects you to pick out 25 husbands and have them all work out. I mean, and just finding one is pretty tough. I mean, that's the right sort.
Yeah.
And then you make mistakes.
Warren, how are you feeling today?
Well, I broke a leg.
What happened?
A few weeks ago, so, which is really, I've been very lucky on that sort of thing. I haven't broken a leg in my life until now, but I feel good. I'm glad I was born.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I wasn't born in some other country, and I was glad initially that I wasn't born female, and I mean all kinds of things. I mean, I really won the lottery when I came out, and other people think they won the lottery if they've got a trust fund set up for them that takes care of them for their whole life and 5 generations thereafter. But I just wasn't raised that way, and I think it's a good thing I wasn't, and I haven't raised the kids that way, or more important, Susie didn't raise them that way.
Well, I want to thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate it.
And we're in an interesting business.
Yeah.